Welcome to the captivating realm of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss any of our exciting new stories. Enjoy the journey.
The medical ward of the Galactic Station was alive with a flurry of activity as medics darted between patients. Recent skirmishes with the Raker fleet had resulted in a surge of casualties, with many requiring immediate attention. Among the varied species being treated, green-skinned Keens, fur-coated Marinites, one patient drew particular attention, a human. Lioa, a young nurse with shimmering silver eyes and dusk-colored skin, felt a mix of curiosity and nervousness as she monitored his vitals. This was her first time assigned to a human, a species still relatively new to the Galactic Union. Corporal Alex Kane lay unconscious, his broad frame nearly too large for the standard cot. His tan skin, marred with scars, captivated her as she worked. "Vitals are stable," Lioa reported, glancing at Dr. Morex, the lead physician. "He has significant trauma to the lower abdomen." Morex, a stern figure with scaled features, nodded in acknowledgement. "Prepare him for a full body cleanse. We need to assess any external damage before proceeding." Lioa gathered her supplies, her hands shaking slightly despite her training. Human anatomy was complex, and she was unsure how it would respond. As she filled a basin with warm, soapy water, she began the delicate task of cleaning Kane's chest, her touch gentle as she tended to his cuts and bruises. His skin felt surprisingly warm. A stark contrast to the cold-blooded species she was accustomed to treating. As she moved lower, washing his abdomen and legs, she noticed an unexpected change beneath the sheet covering him. "Is something wrong?" Lioa murmured to herself, pausing in confusion. She hesitated, biting her lip before continuing. The swelling became evident, forming a noticeable bulge that made her heart race. "Doctor, something's happening to the human's lower region," she exclaimed, panic creeping into her voice. Dr. Morex approached quickly, casting a glance at the swelling. To her surprise, a smirk crossed his face. "Ah, you've encountered a fascinating aspect of human physiology," Lioa's confusion deepened. "Is it dangerous? Is he dying?" Morex chuckled, shaking his head. "Not at all. It's a natural response, an involuntary one, to be precise. It seems your gentle touch has triggered a physical reaction." Lioa's cheeks flushed an intense shade of indigo. She glanced down, the swelling now unmistakable. "I don't understand. Is this normal?" Another nurse, an older Marinite, joined them. "Oh, it's perfectly normal for human males," she explained. "Let's just say they're quite sensitive." Lioa felt her embarrassment deepen. "But I thought his life was at risk." The staff shared soft laughs, and Dr. Morex placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's nothing to worry about, Nurse Lioa. This is common among humans, especially when stimulated." His tone turned playful as he added, "Looks like you've made quite the impression." Mortified, Lioa tried to regain her composure. "I was just doing my job." "And you've done it well," Dr. Morex teased. "It seems your methods are highly effective." Determined to maintain her professionalism, Lioa straightened and cleared her throat. "I'll continue the procedure as intended." She resumed her work, but her gaze kept drifting back to the swelling beneath the sheet. Curiosity burned within her, yet she didn't dare voice her questions. Over the next few days, Lioa frequently checked on Kane, ensuring he was comfortable. She insisted it was her duty. But the thrill of excitement ignited each time she approached his cot. Sometimes, she caught herself staring at his sculpted features, her mind drifting back to his earlier reaction. She had countless questions about human biology but felt too shy to ask. One evening, while adjusting his fore, she felt a light touch on her wrist. Lioa gasped, her eyes darting down to see Kane's hand gently holding hers. "Where am I?" he mumbled, his voice hoarse. Lioa's heart raced. "You're in the medical ward. You were injured in battle." Kane's piercing blue eyes locked onto hers. "Then I must be dreaming," he said with a smile, because I'm looking at an angel." Lioa's cheeks burned as embarrassment washed over her. "No, you're awake." As Kane's grip tightened slightly, his gaze held a sincerity that made her heart flutter. "Then I owe you my life, nurse." Lioa swallowed hard, fighting to keep her composure. A new thought crossed her mind: perhaps humans were more captivating and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. As she adjusted the fore, she felt the warmth of Kane's touch linger on her wrist, sending electric shivers through her. She cleared her throat, striving to remain professional. Her training emphasized maintaining distance, yet Kane's presence felt disarming. "You need to focus on recovery," she instructed, her voice firm. "If you keep teasing me, I may have to sedate you again." His laughter filled the room, deep and inviting. "I promise to behave." As the days turned into weeks and their bond deepened, Lioa found herself lingering longer during her visits. Caring for Kane had transformed from mere duty to a desire she couldn't ignore. He was unlike any other species she had encountered, not just because of his physical responses, but also due to his charm, humor, and the way he made her feel as if she were the only one in the universe. One evening, while checking his vitals, Kane surprised her with a question. "What's it like on your planet?" She blinked, taken aback. "What do you mean?" "I've heard tales of its beauty, the silver sunsets and glowing spores. I'd love to see it one day." Lioa's heart softened. "It's breathtaking, but dangerous. The air and flora can be toxic to outsiders." Kane grinned. "Then I'll need a guide." His eyes sparkled with mischief. "Someone like you." Her heart raced as she allowed herself to envision walking with him under her planet's luminous canopy, sharing moments beyond duty and responsibility. But she quickly pushed the thought aside: humans wouldn't survive there, it wasn't safe. His expression shifted as he reached for her hand. "I'm a soldier, Lioa. I'm accustomed to danger, and sometimes the greatest risks are worth taking." As his fingers brushed against hers, warmth flooded through her. She knew she should pull away and uphold her professionalism. But his touch made it hard to resist. Just then, the door slid open, and Dr. Morex entered. Startled, Lioa withdrew her hand, straightening as if caught in an intimate moment. "Doctor," she greeted, her voice stiff. Morex studied them with narrowed eyes. "How is the patient?" "He's stable," Lioa replied, regaining her composure. "Vitals are improving, and the swelling has reduced." Kane smirked, and Lioa shot him a warning look before focusing back on Morex. "He should be ready for transport soon." Morex's gaze lingered a moment longer. "Remember, Nurse Lioa, it's essential to maintain professional boundaries. We don't want to jeopardize the patient's recovery or your career." Lioa felt heat rise to her cheeks as he left the room. His warning clear. She turned to Kane, who watched her with concern. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Lioa forced a smile, though her heart was still racing. "Yes, just be cautious, Kane. There are rules for a reason." "I understand," he said sincerely. "But sometimes rules are meant to be bent." Lioa felt a flicker of hope at his words, yet she quickly suppressed it. What could possibly come of this? They belonged to different worlds, literally and figuratively. But as their bond grew, she couldn't shake the question: what would happen when he recovered? Would he leave her behind, or could they find a way to bridge the vast distance between their worlds? Liza found herself looking forward to these checkups. There was something soothing about his presence. She bit her lip, suppressing a smile that threatened to escape. "It must just be the medication making you feel this way," she suggested. "Maybe," he replied, but the mischievous sparkle in his eyes indicated he was far from sedated. "Or maybe it's something else." Her heart raced, but she steadied herself, determined not to fall for his charm. "I'm here to assist with your recovery, Corporal Kane. Nothing more." She aimed to sound resolute, but her determination wavered as he reached out and took her hand. His touch was warm, sending shivers through her. "I know," he murmured, lowering his voice to a whisper. But what if there could be more? Her breath caught, and she momentarily froze. The logical part of her urged her to pull away and remind him of the rules, yet the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in existence, made it impossible to resist. "Kane," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We can't," he held on, his thumb making gentle circles on her hand. "Why not? We're two people in the same place, facing the same challenges. Why should we deny our feelings?" The magnetic pull between them intensified, making her heart race. "Because there are rules," she said, though her conviction was wavering. "If we're caught," Kane smirked, his eyes brimming with intensity. "Sometimes rules are meant to be broken." The atmosphere crackled with tension, and before she realized it, Liza was leaning in. She knew it was reckless, but as their lips met, all her hesitations faded away. The kiss started softly, cautiously, but soon deepened. His hand found its way to the back of her neck, pulling her closer, erasing all distance between them. Every nerve in her body ignited as his lips captured hers. She melted into him, her hand resting on his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her palm. She knew she should pull away, but the way he kissed her, like he had been longing for this moment, made it impossible to stop. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Liza felt heat rise to her cheeks. "We can't. We shouldn't," she stammered, even though her body craved more. Kane grinned, his eyes darkened with desire. "That didn't feel like something we shouldn't do." Liza withdrew slightly, her heart racing. "We have to be cautious," she murmured, the weight of reality pressing down on her. "If Dr. Morks finds out, I could lose my position, and you could be transferred." Kane's expression turned serious as he tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I don't want anything to happen to you, but I also can't pretend that I don't have feelings for you." Liza's heart swelled, and she fought back tears. "I feel it too." But just then, a chime from the door startled them. Liza quickly stepped back, her heart racing as Dr. Morks entered, his gaze sharp and suspicious. "Everything okay in here?" Liza straightened, putting on her professional demeanor. "Yes, doctor. Just finishing the morning assessment." Dr. Morks's gaze flicked between them, lingering a beat too long. "Very well. Corporal Kane's recovery is progressing faster than expected. We may prepare him for discharge soon." Liza's stomach dropped. She hadn't thought about how Kane's recovery would mean he'd have to leave. The idea of losing their connection made her chest tighten. "Understood," she said, keeping her voice steady as Morks exited. Kane locked eyes with her. "I won't leave without a fight," he said, his tone firm yet quiet. "I'll find a way back." Liza felt a lump in her throat. "You can't promise that." He squeezed her hand again. "I can and I will." But she knew it wouldn't be that easy. Even if he returned, their relationship would still be forbidden. She tried to focus on her duties, but every glance, every touch felt like a promise, a thrilling yet dangerous promise she wasn't sure she could uphold. Later that night, when the medical ward was quiet, Liza snuck back into Kane's room. She told herself it was just to check on his vitals, but the truth was clear, she couldn't stay away. He was awake, and their eyes met in the dim light. "I was hoping you'd come back," he said, his voice a low rumble. Liza bit her lip, her hands trembling as she sat on the edge of his bed. "I shouldn't be here." Kane reached for her, his hand sliding up her arm, sending warmth coursing through her. "But you are." His voice felt like a caress, and Liza leaned into him, her defenses crumbling. Before she knew it, their lips met again, the kiss deeper and more urgent. She felt his hands exploring her back, pulling her closer until they were completely intertwined. The warmth of his body and the taste of his lips was overwhelming, yet not enough. When they finally broke apart, Kane rested his forehead against hers. "Promise me you'll find a way." Liza's heart raced as she whispered, "I'll try." She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she couldn't let him go. As she slipped out of his room, her mind raced. They were playing with fire, and she was fully aware of it, but the thrill of it all, the way Kane made her feel, was too intoxicating to resist. As she left Kane's room that night, Liza's hands trembled. Every kiss and every touch pushed them further into forbidden territory, feeling more reckless with each encounter. She knew that if Dr. Morks or any other medical staff discovered their relationship, it could end her career and lead to Kane's transfer back to Earth, leaving them with no chance to see each other again. But no matter how hard she tried to pull back, the attraction was too strong. Kane had become a constant presence in her thoughts, drawing her in like a moth to a flame, aware that it could burn her but unable to resist. The next morning, Liza attempted to focus on her rounds, avoiding Kane's room for as long as she could. She knew that each encounter would blur the boundaries between them even more. Yet, as the day progressed, she felt the familiar tug in her chest, the overwhelming urge to see him. When she finally stepped into his room, she found him standing by the window, gazing out at the stars beyond the station's walls. He turned as she entered, a soft smile lighting up his face. "I was starting to think you were avoiding me." Liza felt her heart tighten. "I thought it might be for the best." Kane's smile faded, replaced by concern. "Is this about Morks? Did he say something?" She shook her head, closing the door behind her. "No, but if we continue like this, someone will find out. And if they do, it could spell disaster for both of us." Kane crossed the room, reaching for her hand. "I don't care about the rules, Liza. I care about you." His words sent a rush of warmth through her, weakening her resolve. "But I could lose everything, Kane, my position here, my career." He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "And what about us? Is that worth losing?" Liza's eyes brimmed with emotion as she met his gaze. "I don't know," she whispered. "I'm not sure what's right anymore." Kane leaned in, his lips just inches from hers. "Maybe this is what's right." When their lips finally connected, Liza's defenses shattered. She kissed him back, her hands gripping his shoulders as he pulled her closer. Every touch was electric, and she felt the heat intensifying between them. A fiery tension ignited between them as his hands slid to her waist, pulling her closer and deepening their kiss. Lioa lost herself in the moment, and when they broke apart, their foreheads touched, his warm breath brushing her skin. "I'm not letting this go," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Liza's heart raced as she struggled to find her words. "What if they find out?" His gaze held hers, a determined spark igniting. "Then we face it together." For a fleeting moment, she dared to believe they could make it work. But before she could respond, the door hissed open, and Lioa instinctively pulled away. Dr. Morks stood in the doorway, his expression narrowing as he assessed the scene. "Nurse Liza," he said sharply, "we need to talk." Anxiety surged in Liza as she exchanged a worried glance with Kane before following Morks into the hallway. The door slid shut, leaving her feeling exposed. "I warned you about professional boundaries, Nurse Liza," Morks said, his voice icy. "And yet here you are, in a compromising situation with a patient." "It's not what it looks like," Lioa stammered, but the weakness in her voice was undeniable. Morks's eyes flashed with anger. "I'm not blind, Lioa. This behavior is unacceptable. Do you understand the consequences if I report this to the medical board?" Panic gripped her. "Please, doctor, it won't happen again." His expression remained stern. "I'm giving you one chance. End this now, or I'll have no choice but to file a report." Lioa swallowed hard, her throat tightening. "I understand." With a curt nod, Morks turned and walked away, leaving her alone, trembling with fear. She had been aware of the risks, but now that the threat was real, the weight pressed down heavily. If she continued seeing Kane, everything could be lost. When she returned to Kane's room, her face was pale, her hands shaking. "Kane, we can't keep doing this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Concern clouded his brow as he stepped closer. "What happened?" Dr. Mork saw us, she explained, her voice breaking. He's given me one last chance. If we keep seeing each other, I could be reported. Kane's expression darkened, his grip tightening around her hand. We'll find a way around this. There is no way around it, Lioa insisted, tears stinging her eyes. I can't lose everything. I can't lose you. Kane pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her as she pressed her face against his chest. You won't lose me, he murmured, his voice steady. I promise. Yet, as they embraced, Lioa felt the complexity of their situation loom over them. The more time they spent together, the deeper her feelings grew, making it harder to pull away. That night, lying in her quarters, Lioa stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. She was caught between duty and love. And no matter what choice she made, someone would inevitably suffer. But as she closed her eyes, all she could think of was Kane's touch, the warmth of his kiss, and how his eyes sparkled when they met hers. The following days passed in a blur. Lioa tried to distance herself from Kane, focusing on work and avoiding his room, but every time she walked by, her heart ached, longing for the moments they had shared. One evening after her shift, she found herself outside Kane's door. Despite knowing she shouldn't be there, the desire pulled her in. With a deep breath, she pressed the door panel, and it slid open. Kane was perched on the edge of his bed, his face lighting up at her arrival. I was starting to think you wouldn't come back. Lioa stepped inside, and the door closed behind her. I shouldn't have. He said, closing the distance. But you did. Her resolve melted as he drew her into his arms, and she kissed him passionately, overwhelmed by the emotions she had been trying to suppress. Their kiss was intense, and when they pulled apart, both were breathless. Liza's gaze locked with his as she whispered, I don't care about the rules anymore. Kane's grin widened, and he kissed her again, his hands exploring her back. Good, because I'm not letting you go. As they fell onto the bed, the outside world faded, leaving only the heat between them. In that moment, Lioa surrendered completely, losing herself in his touch and the electric connection that sparked between them. She knew it was reckless, the consequences could be dire, but nothing else mattered right now. As they lay entwined, her heart racing, she realized there was no turning back. The next morning, Lioa awoke to the soft hum of the medical ward's ventilation system. The room was dim, and she felt Kane's warmth beside her. For a moment, she savored the peaceful feeling of being in his arms. But reality crashed back, and anxiety gripped her chest. Carefully, she untangled herself and slipped out of bed. Kane stirred, reaching for her as his eyes opened. Leaving so soon? Liza smiled. Though it was tinged with sadness. I have to get back before the morning rounds. If anyone finds me here, it's over for both of us. He sat up, looking serious. It's not fair. Why should we hide? Liza's heart ached as she got dressed. That's just the way it is, Kane. We can't change the rules. Kane's gaze darkened as he approached her. Then maybe we should. And what if they transfer you or dismiss me? We'd be separated, and it would be worse, she countered. His eyes flared with intensity. I won't let them. Don't let them take you away. I'll fight for this. Her heart raced at his determination, but fear gnawed at her. You can't promise that. His grip on her tightened. I can try. If they transfer me, I'll find a way back to you. I'm a soldier, I know how to fight for what matters. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away. Just be careful. Leaning in, she kissed him one last time, savoring the warmth of his embrace before stepping back. As she exited the room, her mind raced. They were playing with fire, and the thought of losing him felt even more daunting. Over the next few days, Lioa and Kane continued their secret meetings, carefully avoiding suspicion. They shared moments in quiet corners of the station's gardens, stealing kisses beneath the soft glow of artificial stars projected onto the domed ceiling. Each touch, each stolen glance was electrifying. And for a time, they managed to keep their relationship under wraps. But soon enough, cracks began to show. One afternoon, while Lioa was reviewing Kane's medical file in the medbay, Dr. Morks walked in. He said nothing at first, but his gaze felt heavy, like a storm cloud. Lioa pretended to focus on her work, but she felt his eyes piercing her. "Nurse Liza," he finally said, his tone icy and measured. "We need to talk." Liza's stomach twisted as she set the tablet down. "Yes, doctor." Morks motioned for her to follow, and they entered his office. The door sealed behind them, and Lioa felt the walls closing in as she stood before his desk, her hands clasped tightly together. "I've received reports from the station's security." Morks began, his expression unreadable. "They've noted your presence in the patient's quarters outside approved visitation hours." Lioa's heart sank, and she fought to keep her face neutral. "I was checking on his recovery," she lied, aware of how flimsy her excuse sounded. Morks narrowed his eyes. "At 0300 hours repeatedly." Lioa's mouth went dry, and the weight of her deception pressed down on her. "He's been struggling with nightmares," she explained. "I wanted to ensure his vitals were stable." Morks's lips thinned. "I know about Corporal Kane's condition, nurse, and I've also observed your behavior. This isn't just about patient care." He paused, lowering his voice to a cold whisper. "You're—" Liza's heart raced as she faced Dr. Mox, knowing she had run out of excuses. Each moment under his piercing gaze felt like an eternity. "Please, doctor," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "Save your explanations," he interrupted, his anger evident. "I have no choice but to report you to the station's command." Panic surged in Liza's chest. "No, please. I promise it won't happen again." Mox's expression softened just a fraction. "You've already received one warning. If this goes to command, I can't protect you." Liza's chest tightened. "Isn't there another way?" He studied her for a moment before replying, "There might be an option." His gaze lingered on hers, a chill creeping down her spine. "I could overlook this if you were to show me some gratitude." Her eyes widened in shock. "You can't be serious." Mox's smirk was predatory. "I'm the only one standing between you and disciplinary action. Think about it, Liza. I can make this go away." Revulsion surged within her, fists clenched at her sides. "I won't do it." Mox's expression darkened as he leaned back in his chair, disappointment crossing his face. "Very well, but don't say I didn't offer you a way out." He waved her off. "You may leave." Fleeing his office, Liza's hands shook with a mix of anger and fear. Mox not only knew of their relationship but was seeking to ruin her career. Worse, she couldn't tell Kane, doing so would only endanger him further. That evening, she sought solace on the observation deck, gazing at the stars beyond. The vastness of the galaxy was filled with shimmering lights, but all she felt was loneliness. She knew that time was running out, and if she lingered, Mox would get his way. Returning to Kane's room, her heart ached at the concern etched on his face. "What's wrong?" he asked, pulling her close. "We need to end this." "Mox knows everything, and he's reporting us," she said, her voice wavering. Kane's eyes flared with anger, tightening his grip on her. "We can fight this." She shook her head, tears welling up. "There's nothing we can do. If we're caught, they'll separate us for good." His hands cupped her face. Fierce determination in his gaze. "I won't let that happen." Tears spilled over as she leaned into him, feeling his warmth. "I can't lose you, Kane. But if we're caught, I could lose everything." He kissed her, urgency driving the connection. "Then let's leave. We'll find a way off this station." Her breath caught, hope igniting for a moment. "But where would we go?" Kane's eyes burned with resolve. "I don't know yet, but anywhere is better than here. Liza hesitated, torn between duty and her feelings for him. I can't just abandon my responsibilities. Sometimes you have to choose what's most important, and to me, that's you, he said, his grip firm, staring into his eyes. Liza knew what he was asking. A part of her wanted to say yes, to leave everything behind for a chance at freedom. But the fear of the unknown held her back. I need time to think, she whispered, pulling away. Kane's expression softened, and he nodded. I understand. But whatever happens, know that I will always fight for us. Leaving his room, Liza's mind raced with the decision ahead. If she stayed, the consequences would be dire. But if she left, she risked everything she had known, trusting that Kane could keep his promise. Pacing her quarters, she felt the weight of her choice pressing down. The dangers of staying were clear: Mox's threats, potential disciplinary actions, and the chance of Kane being sent far away. But the thought of leaving everything behind, her career, her home, her life, terrified her. Gazing out the viewport at the stars, she envisioned the freedom Kane spoke of. Somewhere out there was a place they could be together without fear. But was it real, or just a fantasy? With determination, she decided to see Kane, needing to confront their situation together. Upon entering his room, she found him waiting, tension in his expression. I was worried you wouldn't come back, he said, relief washing over him. I had to think. Everything is happening so fast, and if Mox reports us. She trailed off. Kane stepped forward, shielding her. We can't keep hiding. He'll find a way to separate us unless we act. Liza felt the warmth of his embrace, her fears fading momentarily. Kane, if we leave, there's no guarantee we'll be safe. He cupped her face. I'd rather face the unknown with you than stay here and risk losing you. Her breath hitched, feeling the weight of his words. What's your plan? Kane's grip tightened. I've contacted a friend on a nearby cargo ship. They're leaving for a neutral zone in 2 days. If we get to them, we can disappear. No one will follow us. Her heart raced at the danger but also the possibility of freedom. 2 days? She asked, excitement battling fear. Kane nodded. We need to be cautious. Mox is watching. We can't give him any reason to act before we're ready. As the hours passed, Liza moved through her duties with a forced calm, hiding her inner turmoil. Every moment apart from Kane felt like an eternity, the tension building as they exchanged glances, knowing their time was limited. On the night of their escape, Liza's hands shook as she packed only the essentials. She had lived on the station for years, but all she could think of was the future they might achieve together. As she zipped her bag, fear threatened to overtake her. What if Mox caught them? Meeting Kane in a maintenance corridor near the docking bay, she felt her heart race. Ready? He asked, determination evident. Liza nodded. They moved quickly, sticking to the shadows, avoiding main corridors. The closer they got to the docking bay, the more adrenaline surged through her. They were so close. As they reached the entrance, Dr. Mox stepped into their path, halting them. Liza's heart sank, and she felt Kane's grip tighten. Going somewhere, nurse? Mox taunted. Dr. Mox, Liza started. Mox raised a hand, silencing her. I've been observing you. You thought you could get away with this? Kane stepped forward, blocking Liza. We're leaving. You can't stop us. Mox's smirk widened. Oh, but I can. Security, we have a situation at the docking bay. Liza's stomach dropped, realizing they had been so close. You won't get away with this, she retorted, desperation fueling her words. Mox's gaze darkened. You should have known better. Now, you'll both face the consequences. In that moment, Liza's mind raced. They couldn't let Mox ruin everything. She glanced at Kane, determination igniting within her. Run! She shouted, pushing past him toward the docking bay. As they sprinted toward the ship, adrenaline surged. Liza's breath quickened as they reached the ramp. "Get in," Kane urged, shoving her inside. She felt a rush of hope as the engines roared to life. With a powerful surge, the ship broke free from the docking bay, and Liza's heart soared as they sped into space. They were finally free. Kane turned to her, exhilaration on his face. "We did it. We're free." Liza laughed, tears of joy streaming down her face. But their celebration was short-lived as Mox's voice crackled over the comm system. "You may have escaped this time, but I will not let you go that easily. You will pay for this, Liza." Her heart sank, but Kane's expression hardened. "We'll stay one step ahead of him." Nodding, Liza steeled herself for the challenges ahead. Together, they would face whatever came next, determined to carve out a new life, one free from the fears of their past. As the ship sped away from the station, hope blossomed in her chest. They were finally free, and she would do everything to keep it that way. As red lights flashed above, the sound of footsteps echoed through the corridors. However, Kane held tightly onto her hand, urging her forward. They reached the docking bay just as a group of security officers appeared, blocking their way. Panic clawed at Lioa, but Kane's gaze remained steady on hers. "We're almost there," he whispered, squeezing her hand. "Trust me." Before she could reply, Kane pulled her aside, and they dashed into a side corridor that led to a narrow maintenance hatch. He entered a code, and the door hissed open. "This way." Without hesitation, Lioa followed him through the hatch into a cramped passage parallel to the docking bay. The alarm sounds faded, but they could still hear the shouts of security officers searching for them. Kane led her to an access point that connected to a docking tunnel. "My friend's ship is just ahead. Once we're aboard, we'll be beyond their reach." Lioa's heart raced as she glimpsed the cargo ship's docking port. They were so close. But just as they approached the hatch, Moore's voice echoed down the corridor. "Stop them." A group of officers emerged behind them, weapons raised. Kane urged Lioa forward, and they sprinted for the hatch. Adrenaline surged through her, making every step feel like an eternity. They reached the hatch just as the officers fired. Lioa heard the shots whizzing by and ducked, feeling Kane's grip tighten on her hand. The hatch to the cargo ship opened, and they leaped inside just as the door sealed behind them. Lioa collapsed against the wall, breathless. Kane stood beside her, eyes fixed on the viewport as the ship's engines roared to life. "We made it," he whispered, triumph evident on his face as the cargo ship pulled away from the station. Lioa felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They had escaped, they were free. Yet as she looked out at the stars, she realized their journey was just beginning. With Kane by her side, she felt prepared to face whatever lay ahead. Together, they would forge a new life, free from hiding. For the first time in years, Lioa felt truly alive. The cargo ship shuddered as it departed the galactic station, engines roaring as it surged into the vastness of space. Lioa pressed her hand against the viewport, watching as the station, the place she had called home for so long, faded into the backdrop of stars. Kane stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, a reassuring presence anchoring her as they ventured into the unknown. "We did it," he murmured, relief and excitement in his voice. Lioa turned to him, a smile forming on her lips. "We did," she traced the line of his jaw with her fingertips, feeling the rough stubble. "But where do we go from here?" Kane's gaze softened as he took her hand, kissing her palm. "Wherever we want. The neutral zone is just a start. We'll find a place where we can be safe and build a life together." Her heart swelled. And she felt the weight of their past lift. For the first time, they were free, free from the rules that had kept them apart, free from the fear of being caught. She leaned in, pressing her forehead against his, savoring the warmth of his presence. "I'm ready," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The cargo ship's pilot, a gruff four-eyed Turan with a calm demeanor, glanced back at them. "You've crossed the threshold, you're officially outside station jurisdiction." He grinned, sharp teeth gleaming. No turning back now. Lioa felt exhilaration surge within her. Thank you for helping us. The Turan waved it off. No problem. Seize an old friend. Besides, I've seen enough of the station rules to know when they're unfair. He winked. Enjoy your freedom. Kane pulled her into a tight embrace, and Lioa felt the strength of his arms enveloping her. We'll make this work, he murmured, his lips brushing against her ear. I promise. She closed her eyes, breathing him in. For so long, fear had shadowed her life, but now, with Kane, that fear seemed distant. I believe you, she whispered, pulling back just enough to meet his gaze. Their lips met in a kiss brimming with promise, melting away the tension and fear of recent days. In that moment it was just the two of them, no rules, no threats, no station, just freedom. As the kiss deepened, Kane's hand moved to her waist, pulling her closer. Lioa felt her body respond. Thrilled to finally explore what had been denied for so long. She smiled against his lips, the electric pull of desire unrestrained. Now that we're alone, she teased, her eyes sparkling, I suppose we have time to catch up. Kane's grin was playful, his hands tracing slow circles on her back. Oh, I'm counting on it. They retreated to the small living quarters of the cargo ship, a cramped but promising space now that they were together. As they crossed the threshold, Kane spun her around, pinning her against the wall, his lips crashing down on hers with an intensity that made her gasp. Lioa's hands roamed over his chest, feeling the muscles tense under her touch. The thrill of finally acting on their feelings sent a rush through her. And she wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer. No more hiding, she whispered, her voice husky. Kane's eyes smoldered, and he kissed her again, hands sliding up her thighs as he lifted her against the wall. No more hiding, he echoed, his voice thick with desire. For a long moment, they were lost in each other, their bodies moving in harmony, the passion built over weeks finally unleashed. It was a freedom Lioa had never envisioned, and every touch, every kiss felt like a promise of the life they could now create together. When they finally pulled apart, breathless and flushed, Kane rested his forehead against hers, hand cupping her cheek. I've never felt this alive. He confessed, searching her eyes. Lioa's heart swelled. Neither have I. They lay together on the narrow bed, the engines hum a soothing rhythm. Kane's arm draped over her waist, and she felt the rise and fall of his chest in the quiet. She traced her fingers along his arm, marveling at how right it felt to be there with him. Wherever we end up, she said softly, as long as we're together, it'll be home. Kane kissed the top of her head, his grip tightening around hers. We'll find a place, Lioa, a place where we don't have to hide who we are. As they lay there, the stars outside the viewport shone like beacons of hope. Lioa felt a peace she hadn't known before. She had left everything behind, the station. Her career, her old life, but gained something far more precious. They would build a new life together, free to love, explore, and be themselves. And as the cargo ship ventured deeper into space, Lioa knew that whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them together. The stars outside blurred into streaks of light as the ship entered hyperspace, the universe unfolding before them. Kane's fingers intertwined with hers, and Lioa felt the thrill of endless possibilities. This was their new beginning, a story just starting to unfold. Years later, on a distant planet far from the reach of the Galactic Station's laws, Lioa and Kane found the home they had dreamed of. Together, they built a life that was both thrilling and peaceful, surrounded by the beauty of a world they could call their own. And every night, beneath the stars, they remembered how they fought for their freedom, knowing that whatever challenges the future held, they would always have each other.